Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 112th edition of the Frank and Stan chat. And it's, I think, probably one of the warmest mornings on record. It's 10:15. We're recording this on a Monday morning, and it feels very warm. Been on the school run already, and it's great seeing everybody out with their hats and everything. But it's going to be a scorcher today. But it's great to be able to have another guest with us today. Hello, Steven Stanley. Hello.
Hi, Frank. Hi, Stan.
Yeah, we'll give Steven a moment just to gather his thoughts, because we're going to ask him to give a brief summary of his career, which has been very varied and interesting. So, how are you, Stan?
I'm fine. I'm just recovering now because I did a walk before the sun got too hot this morning, and then realised they were doing this 10-ish, and I was a bit too far away to get here for 10, so I had to walk faster than I normally walk.
So Stan chat is also good for your health.
Yeah, I suppose you could argue that, or not good if you panic.
Okay, well, thanks for joining us, Steven. I know we've been trying to secure a slot, and the guests that we were due to have this week, an unfortunate event has happened, so that they're unavailable. So I'm really pleased that Steven's been able to step in. So our paths have crossed professionally in the past. So I don't know if you want to just give a summary of your career.
Well, I started off way back when, initially as a guitar teacher a long time ago.
Really?
In the 1980s. Yeah, absolutely. That's how I started off. Known as a peripatetic guitar teacher, and also instrumental in a primary school. So further education and schools were it was a mix, if you like, of different education institutions and sectors. Then went into further education, managed performing arts department, and then into higher education, managing digital audio technology, music technology, and recording. And then in 2003, I was lucky enough to move into the adult learning inspectorate, as it was then. 2000, I think roughly 2008, we emerged with Ofsted, and that's where I kind of met you for a few years, Frank.
Yeah, that's right.
Developing the 2012 framework. Went through various roles in Ofsted, and then just a couple of years ago during COVID, decided to come back out into the sector. So I'm a part-time director at Access Creative College. I'm on the board of governors at ADA Digital, it's National College for Digital Skills. And I do some consultancy, and I still do some Ofsted works and part-time work for Ofsted as an inspector. So it's now a great mix. So that's roughly my history in 3 minutes and a little bit of conversation. Yeah.
Well, it's been interesting because I think we have spoken a little bit about the development of skills post 16, but I think I'm really interested in getting your thoughts on where this is all heading, because the work I do in the Northern Powers Partnership with some major businesses, not just northern businesses but international businesses, when you speak to senior leaders there, they're not convinced that the approach that's currently being adopted is going to address the skills shortage that they're all experiencing at the moment, despite the best efforts of government and various other people. So I'm particularly interested to hear what your views are also on the sort of development of the T levels, which a lot is hanging on those. So there's quite a lot to cover. So let's get into asking Stan what's caught his eye this week.
Let's get Stan's bit out of the way, and then we can get on to something decent.
No.
Well, I've been away in Wales for the last few days and been busy, so I haven't really seen much of the news. But I did get a chance to watch the leadership debacle yesterday. I think it was it ITV yesterday, or was it? I can't remember.
It was ITV, yeah.
And it just brought a new element to interviews where the candidates are allowed to have a pop at each other. And I just wondered, last week I talked about taking some of these leadership techniques into headship interviews with a bit of a video first. Now this takes it into a whole new level where you perhaps bring the candidates together into a room and say, would you appoint that one? And what's their biggest flaw? What have they told you this morning that you think is a weakness?
Yeah, the thing is that they would have to all come from the same senior leadership team, wouldn't they? That would add a little bit of sparkle to it. You know what I
Either
mean?
that, or it could be a part of the process that you have to find out as much as you can about your competitors in the first hour. You put them in a room together for an hour. It reminded me actually of an interview. I think it was for a headship I was being interviewed. It might have been a deputy headship. And the governors were all brought into the room with the candidates. And the chair of governors said to the first candidate, would you like to introduce yourself? And this, I assume it was nerves. This poor girl launched into obviously what she prepared to tell the governors why she wanted the job, how she was the best person for the job, blah, and went on and on as the other candidates cringed. And when she'd finished, and it was a good 5 minutes of a speech, when she finished, the chairman of governors just quietly said, I really just wanted your name. And so I think the interview for her ended at that point when she realised what she'd got wrong, and that was the end of the day, I think.
I did see somebody say on Twitter that they ought to have a desk exercise, like priority thing, an in-tray exercise, if it was really, and actually that made me think about a growing development in that candidates are now being given the questions that they're going to be asked. So it's not a surprise. Or I've heard of some say, well, we give them half. So in a way it tests out how well they're prepared, but then also on the other half, how well they respond to unexpected questions or whatever. So I've got, if somebody's done particularly badly on interviews, I think I'd welcome, sort of some sight of the sorts of issues that they might be wanting to talk to me about, rather than just be left in the dark.
That in-tray exercise could have been to the 4 candidates. Your PR team have just been filmed talking about a party that they say didn't exist. How would you respond?
I do feel for some. We say things, don't we? But and some people listen to them and watch them. But any sort of change in tone or change in approach that we adopt on, say, one of these chats is not picked up, is it? It's not something you said in 2016 is now not being sort of ripped apart because it's different to something you said in 2022. You know what I mean? If actually there hadn't been a change, it makes you wonder whether or not you're so inflexible that actually.
Well, no, Fred, I genuinely think is if you say what you believe and you're honest, you don't get caught out. Yeah. You can say, well, yeah, that was my view at the time, and since then I've changed it through experience. That's absolutely fine. But it's when you claim that you've never supported this, and then it turns out actually you probably did.
Yeah.
It's that lack of honesty, and then trying to cover it up instead of saying, well, yeah, probably I may have done. I still like a politician who says, I don't know. I don't know how much a pint of milk is because I don't go and buy a pint of milk. Full stop.
Yeah.
End those stupid questions and stop it being a major thing that the Prime Minister should know the cost of a pint of milk.
Yeah. Stephen, what's caught your eye this week?
Well, one of the board governors on an AIDA, National Digital College for Skills, some of our representatives were on there, and also Access Creative College have talked about this, where I've been, around the challenge of the digital economy. One of the challenges is recruiting into the sector, both, in terms of teachers and students and apprentices. And, that challenge being around providing the skills for the future, the digital expansion, the way the rest of the world is responding to it and our response to it as well. The fact that, the recruitment of teachers, and it's not just in digital, I think it's across, it mirrors across many, many different occupations, but those differences in salaries between the actual, the sector itself and what they're paying and what the FE sector is paying. And I do think it's it's something that's crept up during the process of austerity, and where we find ourselves now with inflation and what's effectively a decrease in funding for FE over the last 10 years. So it was a really interesting, it's both an exciting time, I think, for digital technology in terms of areas like the Silicon Spa and within this country in the games industry, and
Yes.
we've got talent, there's no doubt. But in terms of education, I do think our salaries need to keep pace with what the sector is offering, and that's a real challenge, I think.
Yeah, my son is, I've mentioned this before, but he's in a UX developer. And he's got into this primarily because he did a master's in digital broadcasting. He was always good at writing. And then he was picked up by Stockport Council, who were trying to become more digitally active. It was, actually the council were finding that everybody was phoning up because their website wasn't good enough, so they couldn't find what they wanted. So they ended up having to, phone up. So Don became part of a team there, and he's just developed that. Now, the thing is that he's got a 2-year-old son, and I said to him last week or the week before, I said, Dom, you'd make a really good early years teacher. He's really calm. He's got a nice way, not just with his son, but with our other grandchildren. And I was thinking, oh, he's got this wealth of experience, it'd be so helpful. And he said, Dad, I can't afford that salary. And he's not having to sort of, in effect, beg for salary increases, because the skills shortage is so great. They A, don't want to lose him, or B, people want him because there is a skill shortage in that area, so finding teachers who would be able to study computer science, shall we say, at secondary level or at post 16 or whatever, you think, well, actually, you're doing something pretty remarkable here, because if you were truly about just yourself, you could go out and just probably triple your salary.
I mean, it affects school sixth forms as well as FE. FE colleges, that sort of dearth in skills and recruitment. We've often talked in secondary about sciences, for example, and the difficulty of recruiting in sciences. So I do think it's something that's crept up very silently, and I think it's also, coupled by this sort of brain drain, if you like, of people aged 50 plus who are also leaving, taking early retirement, leaving. So it's almost like a double whammy for the sector, and I think it's becoming, much more stark now than it was even 15 years ago.
I think it's also a concern that young people. I mean, I don't see computing or digital skills being developed in a cross-curricular way in secondary schools to the extent that you'd want to see it. So I think that the numbers studying computer science at GCSE are very low, and the number of girls that study it are incredibly low. And then those numbers don't pick up really for A level. So the T level, digital T level, is a lot is in that territory. And actually, I've been to one college where they're developing it, and I've spoken to another college who want to develop it. And there is a certain lack of visibility within businesses about what this T level actually means. Most of them are seeing it because actually they're going to have to step up to provide quite a bit more experience, first-hand experience. But I mean, I only know it from the digital end of it. I mean, have you got a broader view than just digital in terms of T levels? Have you got a view on that, Stephen?
Well, we've piloted digital in an Access Creative College this year. I think it's an interesting one, this for me, because in some ways it's a strong move towards parity of academic and vocational, a very strong move. And I've been crying out for years socially that the talk in the playground shouldn't just be A levels and university. It should be, also vocational and degree apprenticeships. There should be a parity, as I believe there has been, post Second World War in the dual system in Germany, Switzerland. I mean, if you come out, family members gone through the gymnasium and through the academic route are equally held in high esteem with those that have gone down the engineering route. So in one way, the technical levels are incredibly a strong move in that direction, making them, academically tough to do, you know, in A levels, and giving that parity between the academic and the vocational. But on the other hand, you know, you've got some fallout from that with the applied vocational qualifications in terms of, you know, what's still current and what's kind of being got rid of, if you like, particularly in the crafts and trades. And then there are some real tough things that come as a result if you make the qualification that much more rigorous, if you like, or tougher academically. It makes it harder to get onto. So those people that don't succeed at age 16, if you like, in the school system, you know, they can go through a transition stage, I believe, with technical qualifications, but it's a tougher thing, you know, what's for them. And then finally, there are some logistical challenges with I think it's 45 days, you know, work placement that you have to do within that technical qualification over 2 years. So it's for me, it's a mixed bag. It's welcome in one sense, in that it's a welcome sort of raising the bar for in that sense of technical qualifications and giving that parity. But on the other hand, there are some downsides to it as well, and some challenges.
Does this link with apprenticeships? So is the opposite true, that students who go into apprenticeships could then do T levels as part of their apprenticeship?
The way I think it works at the moment is that it's almost like it's not quite like the sort of tripartite system we had post Second World War, but I think it's a question of really seeing three distinct types of pathways at post 16. I think we've got an apprenticeship route, which is very much done on the job. You are employed, so you go down that route. So the employer, most of them levy now, I believe, so they pay for the training, and you do it on the job with some off the job training, maybe in a college or in the higher degree, in the degree apprenticeships, maybe, you know, in a university or something. So there's that route. The A levels, as we all know, which has now moved, I think, to a more linear system over 2 years. With I think the AS is now, is it a standalone qualification, or it's not often taken anymore? It's always reduced in terms of its importance. And then the T levels are seen as that kind of technical, off the job type of qualification that you do mostly in the college, but then you do the work placement. It's not, you know, it's got echoes of things in the past, like the 14 to 19 diploma and the like. It's got some echoes of that, Stan.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting you talked before about Switzerland, because about a month ago I was invited to an event held at Hilti, a Swiss company in Manchester, and basically the Swiss government were trying to develop closer relationship with the British government, because in effect it is like a third nation to the EU in the same way that Britain is now. But it was interesting because Andy Burnham was talking, and you know, he stressed the importance of the position of Hilti. Hilti's built its new European headquarters on the road that is between Manchester Met University and Manchester University. And it was saying, this is the reason why we've come here. You know, we want this research and development, access to these students, we want access to those departments. And they were stressing, I think, a particular pump that they developed, which goes in the sea, which is used all over the place, that we don't know anything about. But it's a unique pump that's been developed, either that company or another company that spoke, that actually grew out of the links with Manchester Met and Manchester University. But when talking to the Swiss colleague afterwards, the vast majority of Swiss students don't go to university. So the apprenticeship route for 16-year-olds is the route. He said something like about 80% of students are doing apprenticeships. And of course, the university sector is a much smaller sector. So in effect, what was happening is that they were wanting the British university sector to support their development work. You know, they needed the apprenticeship route to maintain the business, and some of those will move on to sort of research and development. But they were really valuing the university element of this as the bit that they couldn't get. And actually, I think there's a risk here, isn't there, that we could lose the golden nugget that we've got. In order, we've got to be careful not to lose that, but we do need to address the skill shortage.
I mean, there are some fantastic, high degree apprenticeships being offered from, level 4, 5 up to level 6, 7 in universities. And I mean, some superb ones around the country in engineering, etc. And there's no doubt that that's a growing area. I think probably the challenge with apprenticeships is at the lower end, at the level 2
Yeah.
and the level 3, getting younger people in at that level, because the ones going in at the sort of, if you like, the degree apprenticeship level are academic students. They've done their A levels, they've gone in through that route. Necessarily they're quite high achieving, and they're preferring that route to doing a straight degree. And often the degree apprenticeship might combine a degree with the standard of apprenticeship, so you get the best of both worlds. So yeah, I mean, it's as I say, it's an incredibly exciting time for me, because I've been banging on about social parity in terms of academic, and I mean, I've always likened it to the parents talking in the primary school playground, saying, where's your child going to go? Are they going to go to the Russell Group University, whatever? Well, now I'm hoping they're having those conversations, saying, well, I'd really like my child to be a marine biologist or something, and do the degree apprenticeship. I hope that sort of agenda and conversation changes over the next decade or so.
I do think it is changing. I think economically, the costs of going to university now make it. I think even wealthy parents are thinking about value for money in that sense. So I think they're looking at other options, whether there's enough knowledge on their side. Because I mean, I think we're both Stan and I are learning today from you, Stephen, and we're in the sector. So how
God help us all then.
I know. Well, the thing
You're
is
learning from me today.
the thing is, though, is
Yeah.
that if there are parents and grandparents and whatever carers, don't have that level of awareness, they'll simply fall into the old trap of, well, go to university sort of thing.
I think it needs more promotion. I think it's early days, but yeah, I'm hopeful in that sense.
I do think it's changing, because I do think, and even as lately as the COVID, it has made people think again about what they're doing and why they're doing it. And people are looking, it's happening in teaching when people are leaving teaching to say it's not worth it. People are saying, I want to do a job that I enjoy, and I'm not under the pressure. And I think that's the same now with students, where they're looking to go. Because, I mean, I don't know many in the 16 to 20s, but of two I know that have gone into apprenticeships, they're the ones now that are flashing the cash about amongst their colleagues. And if you've gone to university and got yourself a debt of 30, 40,000 pounds, it's very different from having cash in your hand from being a worker now.
Yeah,
and I do think that's changing the way some people think.
I've not thought about that before, but actually, it's funny. I mentioned my son. He's there. You imagine that he's of a certain age now, so they're either in a relationship, getting married, or having children. So it's one of those periods where you meet up again. Whether it's for, I don't know, christening or for a wedding or what have you. And he's had a number of sessions recently where he's met up with friends some of whom went into apprenticeships, some went into their father's business or a link business, others went to university. And actually there is amongst his group, there is a deep respect for those who, whichever route they went down. You know what I mean? In effect, that's just a mechanism for a career. And so now they're at the point of really considering the decisions they made and the careers they're in. And speaking to Dom, some of them are in the wrong career because they've had access now to the careers that their friends have got into may have been a better fit, but they weren't aware of it at the time, or are gradually finding it. But actually are now at a point where they've invested so much in their career already, because they went through a university route, that actually it's quite tricky now to find their way into another career, to reskill themselves.
Part of the challenge, I think, is the promotion. And a lot of that's got to be around the Gatsby objectives in terms of the advice and guidance employment and how that's promoted in schools. And I know that that's a sea change, that things are getting better in terms of that awareness, because I know that when my children were at schools, when it came to the sixth form, it's sort of the sort of day to talk about the sixth form and where your children would go post A levels, because both my children did A levels. Apprenticeships were hardly mentioned. I mean, there was a mention of internships, but I think that's changing now, and I think it needs to change probably earlier in the equation, a much younger age, in terms of what's on offer in your lives.
Well, we've had Neil Smith on here, who's the principal of Cheadle School, which is a independent school. It's just literally about half a mile from where I'm sitting. And Neil has spoken on a number of occasions, not on Frankenstein Chat, about how that's a big challenge for the independent sector. Where actually there's this perception that actually you invest in this education because the natural route for that is then off to a really good university, or I'm not sure about really good, but anyway, to a particular university. But he's beginning to see that challenge occurring, and they're coming from really way back. That the thought there of career guidance is primarily around, well, here's your UCAS forms and I can help you with your personal statement type of thing. But parents are beginning to start talking about different types of routes forward post 18. And he's finding that a challenge. For some of his staff, that's a challenge.
Well, it's encouraging that the parents are demanding that. I mean,
well, yeah, it is. I mean,
they're the customers after all, in one sense, aren't they?
Yeah. Okay, well, what's caught my eye this week was I noticed that we've been very fortunate here to have some governors on, including the leader or the CEO of the National Governors Association, but as well as Susan Brickell, a governor in Manchester who has the highest number of hits of any. Whenever we bring Susan on here, the number of people that watch it goes through the roof. But I've noticed that a report out recently or this week has indicated that there is a grave shortage in terms of the numbers of governors, people willing to take up the role. And they were saying that I think that there are an increasing number of governing bodies, trust boards, where there are vacancies. And in a way, that you can understand perhaps the reason why, when you think about the expectations that laid on governors, shall we say. I had an inspection as a trustee about 3 weeks ago, where it was a very nice chat with actually a former HMI that I worked with. It was very cordial, but in a way I came from that with a sort of knowledge level probably greater than most governors, in terms of the sorts of things he was asking and where it was all leading. And for me, it just sort of made me think about, how we, the pressure that's on governors to know their schools so well, to invest time and effort into it all. That's a big challenge, and I can understand why some people feel as though it's a challenge that I used to enjoy, but actually all the fun's gone out of it now, because I feel as though I'm being held to account for everything that happens. I mean, is that something for you, Stan? That you're in that boat as well, aren't you?
Yeah, I've been a governor in 2 schools recently, but I'm now only a governor in 1. And I think when I spoke to the head before I became a governor to say, were they looking for a governor? I actually asked him if local schools, because when I came out of everything I've been doing education, I thought I might have something to offer. Particularly, I asked him any schools that were really struggling to find governors, because I might be an asset to those schools. And within a fortnight, he drung me back to say, well, come and be a governor at my school, which wasn't the intention, but it's enjoyable. Sometimes you have to sit on your hands because you know more than some other governors, and I'm probably guilty of butting in too much and saying no, that's not, usually about legal matters, to be fair, to say, well, we can't do that because it's not something we're allowed to do. But I enjoy it. But you're right, Frank, there's a lot of pressure for training. How many training modules have you completed? Can you keep your training log up to date? Meetings, a minimum of 3 a term, sometimes more. And following up, simple things like the risk assessments that everyone had to do that had to be signed off by governors. So we had a team of governors who were signing off risk assessments. So it's a lot, and these, we're volunteers. Governors are volunteers, not paid professionals. But I also think that the change to boards and the change to mats, where governors don't really have that much influence, is making it, shrug your shoulders. Well, why would I do it?
Yeah.
Because there's, and I can see people saying no. That if you're not going to leave us actually in charge of the local school, but just be a promoted PTA basically, then there's nothing in it for me.
You're a trustee, aren't you, as well?
Yes, I'm now governor. I'm new to the role. I mean, I've got a couple of things to probably to contribute to the subject. I think the first is that Stan mentioned that it's a volunteering role, and indeed, when I was with Ofsted, I was allowed to run a chess club in a primary school, and that actually became more demanding. The better the score got, the more silverware the parents wanted, and it became a sort of, I became more like Arsene Wenger towards the end of the time, because they were almost like performance indicators and trophies that I had to win as a state school going into a national competition. So it became more pressurized. So volunteering was hugely beneficial, but quite demanding in terms of all the organizing of the tournaments and the training of the children, etc. Now I've come in as a governor just recently, and as being part of the sort of executive in Access Creative College, so in two different ways. What I've noticed is actually trying to get hold of what the role is in that sort of support and challenge advisory role. And I think Stan's right that the demands, it's almost like it's become an accountability role in some ways. It's become a role which has become almost professionalized in a way, and there's a lot more demands on being aware of the performance of the place that you're governing. It really is a true governance thing or entity. So I do feel a little bit of a pressure coming into that role as stands as a volunteer, in a bit way that there's increased demands for silverware in the chess club. I think there's also an increased demand in terms of your contribution to make sure that you provide the kind of quality at that role that you can.
I think the report also said that getting young under 30s to be governors was a major challenge, and I think it was something there are more over 80s than there are under 30s as governors.
Interesting. I would say, Frank, that my experience is that most of the people who become governors young are either teachers themselves, or work in education, or have a commitment to education. It's very rare to find, there'll be parent governors, but quite often parent governors are teachers somewhere else. It's very rare, I think, to find governors under 30, 35 who have not got a connection with education. Because
I think we broadly move into the post-40s category as three of us, don't we? Or just broadly.
Yeah, I thought you were going to go into the post.
I found I have to go further down that scroll. You wonder if the scroll's going to actually go that far.
Yeah, I mean, I think though the report also spoke about the involvement of younger people, and I'm not clearly you need to because some of the issues that you're dealing with, you've got to be over 18, but actually there are a number. I meet a number of people, young people, who have either tried or are, and find the way meetings are managed, just a little bit too clunky and a bit too officious, so that the thought of giving 3 hours of an 18, 19-year-old having to plow through 400 pages of papers, it's not the easiest sell, So it did make me think though about criticisms of governing bodies and the way that they're managed, that actually they do fall into a sort of prescribed way. You can go from one school to another, and actually the process is managed in very similar ways, so whether or not there needs to be some freeing up, thinking about how these decisions are made, and because at the moment they're not going to appear attractive to younger people.
I have to say, where the school I'm at has 2 subcommittees, just 2. one that deals with, one's called the executive and the other's called strategic. So literally one that deals with the day-to-day management of the school leadership, and one that deals with the longer term. And it makes the full governors meetings quite efficient, because a lot of it's deferred to the smaller committees.
Yes, it's the same. It's the same where I am. There's an education committee, for example. So you're absolutely right. Yeah.
The only thing I have about those, and it does wind me up every time, is when you get to a governors meeting that then think they need to go through the minutes and everything else of the two subcommittees, because then you're just having the same meeting 3 times. So I have a big thing about saying, no, all you need to do is approve of the minutes. You can't comment on them because you weren't there. So you can read the minutes and comment on them, but that's it.
Well, I find it, for me, learning the trade, I find that now, how much do I put my oar in? That's the thing that I'm trying to really wrestle with.
But sometimes people want you to. I'm a trustee, and they look at you in the meeting. I think, oh, I'm expected to say something now, you know. And actually,
they look at me, Frank, you go,
oh, no, not again. I'm sure that's what. Honestly, I'll put it on record. You know, Brendan, thank you, the CEO of that trust. You know, he puts up with me. But one thing before we move on to room 101, Stephen, just interested. We haven't spoken about BTECs and their place and how are they under attack from the T level? I think they are. But I mean, have you got a view on that?
I mean, it's a difficult one, that, because the BTECs are warmly liked, like anything that's been around for some time. And I alluded to the fact, I think some of these are the applied qualifications, or the applied vocational qualifications, and there are some victims as a result of that. For example, we talked about the tech trades, like the plumbing, electrical installation. I think those sorts where those qualifications have been stopped or are stopping. I think there's not as many that have been stopped as thought originally, and it's obviously a question of, is there duplication between these qualifications and the tech qualifications? And the interesting thing when we look at subjects is, of course, that there is often some qualifications that lend themselves to a tech level, and some that lend themselves to an A level. For example, you wouldn't want to do an apprenticeship in history, would you? I mean, it doesn't quite sit. Well, you might. I mean, it's a possibility, but it doesn't quite sit with the type of qualification that it is. So I think with applied qualifications, they're much loved, but the question is, how many will go? How many would be deemed as duplications of tech levels? And it will probably all settle down. In my particular area, performing arts, music, performing arts, I think there will probably be a blend of things across the piece. I mean, there are some sort of areas like the service sector, for example, engineering, audio engineering, lighting, techs, and venue technicians, where it lends itself maybe to more the apprenticeship side. And there are other sides like maybe ballet, jazz, dance, that maybe sits better in the applied vocational. So it will be a mix, I think, in the arts.
Fabulous. Okay. Room 101. Stephen, what are you putting in room 101?
Well, I thought long and hard about this. I've changed my mind several times, but I'm going for something a bit broad and big, and that's the first past the post voting system. I've decided in my lifetime. I remember it being an A level when I did economics. I don't know why I ended up doing economics, because I wanted to do something completely different. But in those days, you had to do economics, as it sort of kind of sat with art. Apparently, I don't know what the correlation, and British Constitution, which nobody knows what that is. And I remember one of my British Constitution A level papers was around the first past the post system, proportional representation. What would be the advantages and disadvantages of that? And I remember thinking that, not really understanding it in terms of my experiential, my life skills. But now looking back, I think we have to modernize the way that we vote. And so I would definitely, the first past the post system, I think, whilst it is a quick and easy solution to one winning and one losing, I think there are a lot of people whose votes don't count. So I think there is, and I know we've had a sort of tentative referendum, I think, on that, which has disappeared into the ether. But I think the time is right to look for that. So that's what I would go for.
I think Stan and I will agree with that one. So yeah, we'll allow that to happen. So well, can I thank you, Stephen, for giving us your time this morning. I'm really pleased that we've been able to talk about a number of topics that we haven't been able to cover, and you know, your insight and depth of knowledge of this, I hope will be helpful for those who watch and listen to our broadcast every week. So thank you very much. And just to say, Stan, we've got Peter Cox is going to be our guest next week, or it's actually this week on Friday. We're going to do it on Friday, and that'll be the last in this academic year. And then we start up again on the 2nd of September. And we've got a host of guests all lined up to, I think, actually the one just before Christmas. So we've only got a couple of slots between September and December that are running free at the moment. So anyway, thank you, everybody. And we'll see you all for our last show next week.
Thank you.